We spend our entire lives inside an ongoing conversation, not with the world, but with ourselves. This inner dialogue is subtle but constant. It narrates, judges, evaluates, anticipates. It whispers opinions about who we are and what we're worth, often without us realizing it's there. We hear it when we look in the mirror, when we fall short, when we dream quietly about what we want but hesitate to move. And yet, almost no one teaches us how to notice this voice, let alone shape it. From early childhood, our minds absorb language not just for communication, but for identity building. The tone of a parent's voice, a teacher's reprimand, a peer's laughter, all of it becomes woven into the voice we now call our own. By the time we are adults, we often confuse this voice with truth. But it is not the voice of truth. It is the voice of conditioning, shaped by fear, by survival, by the need to belong. This inner voice, and especially the questions it asks, plays a profound role in how we experience reality. Because every question, whether conscious or unconscious, directs attention. It shapes perception. It opens certain doors in the mind and closes others. When we ask, "Why am I always like this?" the mind searches for proof of that flaw. But when we ask, "What am I learning about myself right now?" the mind begins searching for insight, for meaning. Questions are not neutral. They are psychological forces. They are either rooted in fear, in the desire to protect, avoid, or control, or aligned with desire, meaning, and the will to grow. Fear-based questions tend to sound logical, even responsible, but beneath the surface they reinforce old stories of inadequacy. What if I fail again? How can I make sure I don't get hurt? Why am I still not good enough? These are not truly reflective questions. They are protective scripts designed to shrink us into safety. Desire-aligned questions feel different. They don't deny fear. They rise above it. They come not from the frightened child within us, but from the deeper self that remembers who we really are. What would I do if I trusted myself? What truth am I ready to live, even if it's uncomfortable? How can I meet this moment with grace? These questions don't just change our mindset. They change our chemistry, our posture, our presence. The shift begins when we notice not just the content of our thoughts, but the nature of the questions behind them. What emotional state is the question coming from? Does it constrict or expand us? The nervous system responds to every question as a signal. Questions rooted in anxiety trigger contraction. Questions rooted in curiosity invite openness. And neuroscience confirms this. Repeated thought patterns, including repeated styles of questioning, reshape the brain's wiring. This is neuroplasticity in motion, the mind sculpting itself through attention. Transformation, then, does not begin with answers. It begins with better questions. Questions that don't reinforce wounds, but awaken wisdom. Questions that don't seek control, but invite connection. The most powerful ones are often the simplest, asked not to find something clever, but to come home to something true. When we shift our inner questions from fear to desire, we aren't just reframing a thought. We're repatterning the self. One question at a time, we step out of the narrow corridors of self-protection and into the spaciousness of self-expansion. This is the work. This is the way. And this is how we begin, not by forcing change, but by asking differently. To live with intention is to ask with intention. Every life is shaped by the questions we dare to ask or avoid. Most people never examine their internal questions because they believe questions are simply byproducts of thought. But in truth, questions are seeds, and every seed has a harvest. Whether the harvest is bitterness or wisdom depends entirely on what we plant. The art of asking in the direction of growth is not about pretending to be positive or forcing optimism. It is about becoming skillful with the mind. Just as an artist learns to shape clay or a musician learns to shape sound, The conscious person learns to shape thought through inquiry. We stop letting the mind run wild with anxious or judgmental questions and instead begin guiding it, gently, repeatedly, toward expansion. To live with intention is to ask with intention. Every life is shaped by the questions we dare to ask or avoid. Most people never examine their internal questions because they believe questions are simply byproducts of thought. But in truth, questions are seeds, and every seed has a harvest. Whether the harvest is bitterness or wisdom depends entirely on what we plant. The art of asking in the direction of growth is not about pretending to be positive or forcing optimism. It is about becoming skillful with the mind. Just as an artist learns to shape clay or a musician learns to shape sound, the conscious person learns to shape thought through inquiry. We stop letting the mind run wild with anxious or judgmental questions and instead begin guiding it, gently, repeatedly, toward expansion. This requires practice, and more than that, it requires patience, because old questions often run deep. For years, we may have asked ourselves things like, "Why can't I ever get it right?" or "What's wrong with me?" without realizing how much power we were giving them. These questions don't just reflect a belief, they reinforce it. The mind, seeking consistency, will find answers that support the question's tone. "What's wrong with me?" will return 1,000 unkind replies. But what if we changed the script? What if we asked instead, "What is right with me that I've forgotten?" What if we replaced, "Why am I always behind?" with, "What pace honors both my purpose and my peace?" What if we stopped asking how to impress others and started asking how to align with our truth? The transformation begins here, with the choice to become deliberate with what we ask. Rewriting the inner script is not about forcing a new story, but about making space for a truer one that has been waiting underneath the noise. The new script doesn't deny struggle, it doesn't erase pain, but it doesn't let pain be the narrator. Instead, it places the pen in your hand again. It lets you become the author of the dialogue you live inside. So, when life gets uncertain, and it always will, you can return to your practice. Ask gently. Ask clearly. Ask from the self that knows who you are beyond fear. You might ask, "What would love do here? What's the kindest thought I can think about myself right now? What part of me is ready to be seen, heard, or expressed?" These are not slogans. They are invitations. Invitations to meet yourself with depth, with dignity, and with honesty. Over time, asking in this way becomes a rhythm. It becomes a habit of compassion, and that habit builds a new emotional home, one where safety doesn't come from control, but from connection, where clarity doesn't come from force, but from presence. This is not magic. It is discipline. It is devotion. It is the daily act of choosing to speak to yourself as someone you respect, not someone you have to fix. And in doing so, you begin to rewire not only your thoughts, but your life. There are questions that shake us, and questions that steady us. Questions that reopen old wounds, and questions that remind us we're still healing. But in the midst of life's noise, its urgency, its uncertainty, there are also questions that quietly anchor us. Not because they provide easy answers, but because they return us to center. These are the foundational questions, the ones we can ask again and again in every season of our becoming. They're not formulas. They're not affirmations in disguise. They are doorways into clarity, courage, and connection. Here are 5 such questions. 1. What do I truly need in this moment? Not to be impressive, but to be whole. This question bypasses the ego's performance and listens to the body, the heart, the soul. It shifts us from striving to sensing. 2. What would I choose if I trusted myself completely? Trust is not a feeling, it's a commitment. This question exposes where fear has taken the wheel and offers a chance to take it back. 3. What part of me is asking to be heard right now? We are not one voice, but many. Some are wounded, some wise, some hidden. This question is an act of self-integration, the beginning of inner wholeness. 4. What does love look like here, even if it's hard? Not romantic love, not passive love, but the fierce, grounding presence that asks, how can I show up with integrity, even when I'm scared? 5. What story am I telling myself, and who might I be without it? We don't just live experiences, we narrate them. And sometimes changing the narration is the beginning of changing everything. These questions are not meant to fix you. They are meant to free you from the automatic loops, the inherited scripts, the invisible rules you didn't choose but somehow agreed to live by. And they are especially powerful in moments of crisis. Because it's in crisis, when the ground feels shaky, when certainty dissolves, that the old questions come rushing in. Why is this happening? What did I do wrong? How will I ever get out of this? These questions are understandable, they are human, but they rarely help us heal. In times of crisis, we need a different kind of question, not one that demands control, but one that restores connection. Not one that shouts, but one that listens. We need questions like, what is life trying to realign in me? What part of myself have I abandoned that is now asking to be reclaimed? If I let this moment be my teacher, what might it be revealing? These are not easy questions, but they are liberating, because they shift our relationship with struggle. They turn crisis from a punishment into a portal. They remind us that even in our darkest hours, we are not just reacting, we are becoming. And perhaps this is the heart of conscious inquiry, to ask not from fear, not from habit, but from the deep knowing that every question is a step away from who we were taught to be, a step toward who we truly are. There is a quiet crisis beneath many modern lives, not the crisis of failure or even pain, but the crisis of disconnection from ourselves. We learn to appear confident, to perform competence, even to speak about healing and growth. But deep beneath the surface, many people carry a hidden ache. They do not trust themselves. They doubt their instincts. They second-guess their choices. They outsource their worth to the opinions of others. And worst of all, they believe this is normal. But self-trust is not a luxury. It is the foundation of any lasting inner transformation. Without it, every question becomes a negotiation with fear. Every step forward feels like a risk of self-betrayal, and no amount of external approval can substitute for the quiet confidence that comes from knowing I am safe with myself. The good news? Self-trust is not something you're born with or without. It's a muscle, and it's built through practice, especially the practice of inquiry. Because every question you ask is a moment of self-relationship. When you ask a fear-based question, you reinforce the belief that you are dangerous to yourself, that you must be corrected, fixed, or managed. But when you ask a desire-aligned question, you say, I believe there's wisdom in me worth listening to. This is how trust is rebuilt. Not in grand declarations, but in the small daily act of turning toward yourself with curiosity instead of condemnation. It might sound like, what am I feeling right now? And is it okay to feel this? What's the most honest answer I can give myself in this moment? Even if I don't know yet, can I stay present with this question? And then, over time, something shifts. You stop looking for permission to be you. You stop waiting to be rescued. You stop fearing the unknown, not because it's safe, but because you've remembered that you are. This is not about perfection. It's about presence. And presence is built day by living your questions. To live your questions is to make them companions, not burdens. You don't demand answers on a schedule. You don't interrogate your soul. You simply stay close to the inquiry, like sitting beside a fire, warmed by it, changed by it, letting it do its work in you over time. You might journal with your questions, speak them aloud on a walk, sit with one silently before sleep. You might forget them for a while, only to find them returning, deeper this time, wiser. That's the nature of a living question. It evolves with you, and eventually, without trying, your life begins to mirror the questions you've asked. If you ask, "How do I protect myself?" you live a life of armor. If you ask, "How do I open to what's true?" you live a life of honesty. If you ask, "What wants to be born through me?" you live a life of contribution. This is why inquiry is not just a technique. It's a way of being, a way of listening to the whisper beneath the noise, a way of walking through the world, not just trying to survive it, but to make meaning of it. And the beauty is, this way is always available. Every morning a question waits for you. Every moment a doorway opens, and every breath, if you let it, can bring you home. At some point along the journey, we stop looking for the right answers. Not because answers no longer matter, but because we've begun to recognize something deeper, the voice beneath the answer, the presence behind the question, the quiet guide within. This is the inner teacher. It does not speak in formulas or loud proclamations. It whispers in moments of stillness. It arises when the mind grows quiet enough to listen. And though it may have been buried for years beneath noise, urgency, and performance, it never leaves us. It waits, patiently, faithfully, for us to return. Letting questions guide you beyond answers means you stop chasing certainty. You stop demanding clarity as a condition for peace. Instead, you trust that the very act of inquiry, held with sincerity and presence, is enough. Enough to soften what is hard, enough to illuminate what is true. You begin to live differently. You listen to your life not as a problem to solve, but as a conversation to deepen. You meet each moment with a sense of invitation, not to master it, but to meet yourself within it. You no longer fear the unknown because you've learned to bring your own light. And when the world grows loud again, as it always will, you have a place to return to, the center within, the teacher within, the voice that does not need to control because it remembers it is already whole. This inner teacher does not promise ease, but it offers something more enduring, companionship. It walks with you through the dark, through the doubt, through the questions you still cannot answer, not to erase them, but to sit beside them with grace. Because the deepest truths are not given, they are grown, and they grow best in the soil of sincere inquiry, watered with patience and lit by presence. So now you don't need to rush toward resolution. You don't need to prove anything. You can ask and wait. You can wonder and trust. You can walk and listen. And in that quiet listening, you begin to hear not just the question, but the one who asks it. That is where all transformation begins, not with having the answer, but with becoming the one who no longer fears the asking. You are not here to perform answers. You are here to live your questions, and in doing so, become something true.